Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the January 2023 edition of Molten Music Monthly. Yes, it's a bit cold, Do you remember, right, that I used to do these outside back in the days when I had no internal lighting? But yeah, it's a bit chilly, but we're coping with it. We're doing all right. And here's what's coming up in this month's monthly. SSL get into audio interfaces. Korg takes the Modwave native. DF Audio does a little patch bay just for me. Herb and Stones gets solidly felt. Arturia takes Pigments to level 4. Melody Oracle is part spirit organ, part board game. NGEN puts Ableton-style algorithms into a little box. Rhodes samples itself. Strokes samples other things. And I've got a bumper selection of wonderfully awesome Eurorack modules to have a poke around in. But first, there's a lot of talk on that old internet about how YouTubers get paid and whether they're worth anything and what their value should be to our industry. Here's where I am. Hang on a minute. On second thoughts, I'm not sure you really want to listen to me prattling on about being a superstar YouTuber, so maybe let's put this at the end in case you're interested and just get straight to the gear. Now, the SSL-12 is not Solid State Logic's first audio interface, but it is the first one that really sort of took my interest. It's a good looking thing. It's a desktop machine. I love a desktop audio interface. I'm very much into and all over those. It's got a nice big knob. Yes, I like all of that. It's got some metering, some other knobs and bits and pieces. So it's kind of ticking all of the boxes all the way down from a company that usually makes massive mixing desks. So you kind of get the sense that the technology inside, preamps, routing and such like, is going to be top notch. It's 12 inputs and 8 outputs over USB. Of course, 12 inputs, you think, well, I can only really see 4. Well, that's because there's 4 preamps. You've got 4 regular inputs, and then you've got a chunk of ADAT for input 2. And that is either slightly annoying or useful for future expansion, depending on your point of view. The other cool feature that I like is this Legacy 4K button. Nothing to do with screen resolution. In this case, it's to do with introducing some colourful characterizations of an old legacy mixing desk. So it's a bit like the UAD Vault interfaces, where you kind of have a button that makes it sound warmer, slightly crappier, slightly like it's a little bit clapped out. But we like that. I like that. That's the sort of thing I like in an audio interface. Why just have it pristine and clean when you can have it a little bit muddy and foggy and just sounding fabulous? Korg have released the Modwave as a native plugin, the same as they've done with the Op6 and the, what was the other one? The Wave State, I think it was. Fantastic. These are great. I mean, I reviewed the hardware Modwave, which is sitting over there behind me somewhere, which evidently, when you turn it on, is a piece of software running on a Raspberry Pi or something like that deep inside. So it doesn't feel that it was too much trouble for them to extract it and stick it into like a VST format. The plugin is great. It gives you access to everything, gives you lovely waveform displays. You've got a massive big modulation circle square thing pad in the middle that you can enjoy and enthuse about, and the sound quality and the presets and the movement and the modulation and all of that stuff is exactly the same as it is in the hardware. It has all the motion sequencing, it has the chaos engine, it has all of the oscillator models and filter models, and it's just all there. It's all properly there. I mean, Korg do a really good job on their software instruments. I mean, they've also updated quite recently their Korg collection I think to version 4, and it's got, I mean, you've got like 20 years worth of software synths in there, because they were doing this way before anybody else was doing it well. And there's some great sound sources, some great legacy stuff from Korg stuffed in there, and this new stuff is also great. Now, DF Audio made these wonderfully passive patch boxes, all a bit like this one, which I've looked at before and really liked because of just the way that you can use them to patch into stuff simpler and more easily and kind of directly without having to rework your patch the the whole time. It's almost like a matrix mixer, but doesn't quite go that far. It's a simpler, straightforward way of patching things together, which seems to be, rather than, I mean patch bays tend to be a bit of a rack, which disappear under a desk somewhere. In fact, I have exactly that down here, and then you can never work out where anything went to or what that was plugged into. So they have these desktop version things, and a new one called Patchwork, which is this little fella. Now this is great because the other ones were a bit big, a bit chunky for what I want. I kind of want something simple. Now this is really, I suppose, originally designed for guitar pedals. Put all your guitar pedals in here and then you can patch various stuff to it. And in that regard, it was kind of had the guitarist in mind. But for me, what speaks to me immediately is what a great way of patching guitar pedals into your Euro rack. Of course it is. That's what it's for. It's even got the right size jacks on this front end. So how does it work? I don't know. I haven't really looked at it in any depth yet, but it's been knocking around on my desk for a little while now. And I really do mean to get into it as soon as I get 5 minutes. I will plug it in. But the basic idea is that you can leave your effects patched in, and then all you got to do is patch in the front. Because with guitar pedals and other bits and pieces, they just end up cluttering up the place. You've got to plug things in, plug things out, big jacks all over the place. Whereas this, as I say, I can have a little bank of them. I might have a little shelf of desktop / pedal guitar effects, which is what we seem to be all using these days, and just leave them permanently wired in and then just access this when I want to use them. I think that's brilliant. I really like it. And I love the fact that this is more compact. It's not this huge, enormous thing we're having to deal with. It's simple. You've got 12 lots of something which plugs into something else, and you've got 12 things on the back here. So that probably will make sense to somebody. But this is it's coming very soon, if it's not out already. And I'll hope to do a video on it soon. Herbs and Stones are just awesome, really. They produce these weird and wonderful boxes of stuff which has an amazingly organic and earthy kind of hippie trippy vibe going on, at the same time as being you know, finding itself into sort of hipster areas, into more traditional areas. It really crosses the boundaries between boutique and, I don't know, what's the other thing on the other side of boutique? Who knows? But it's awesome. The latest thing is called the Solid Felt, which is a great name. It's a great name for anything. I mean, it's a great name for whatever this is, which is, oh, it's a stereo multi-mode filter. But it's, you know, it's a great name for any piece of gear, I would say. Now this one is a stereo multi-mode filter, so you've got 2 channels of either independent or serial or parallel filtering going on in a desktop unit. I really like this concept. I recently reviewed the Elta Music one, their Polivox filter, which is a desktop one, and it was totally brilliant. Absolutely loved it. Wished I'd done a video on it, but they asked for it back, sadly. So it's great to see more of these coming about, because they're useful in all sorts of situations. And if you're running desktop synthesizers rather than Eurorack, then having access to different filters than what your synthesizer has got, I think, is excellent. Particularly if you can run the whole lot through everything and then whack that down and whack that up, which is, you know, something we'd quite like to do. Anyway, the Solid Felt is fully analog, has 2 analog filters, different modes you can set, CV control over bits and pieces. It has a stereo overdrive effect, so you can really start driving in that warmth. It has an envelope follower on the inputs. You can drag that out as control voltage. You can feed it back onto itself to make it squeal and develop your own experimental synthesizer sounds. Now, Pigments from Arturia is already awesome. It's a great synthesizer, a great software synthesizer. It really embraces the idea that software can provide a fascinating interface to what you're doing. It provides the opportunity for visualizing modulation, visualizing waveforms, the way things connect together. It's a peach of a software synth that will produce all sorts of fantastic sounds that you can both sequence internally, modulate and move about. It's got, you know, increasing numbers of sound engines, from granular to wavetable, virtual analog, pulling all of those things together, stuffing it through some great modeled filters and then affecting the heck out of it. It's great. It's now at version 4. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, What did they bring to version 4 is the question. Well, in one sense, they've calmed it down with the play mode. So they've taken out all the extraneous stuff and just let you play with the presets, a bit like Analog Lab does, I suppose. But I think that probably makes it appear less overwhelming, because there's a lot of information in Pigments, and perhaps I think that's quite a good move to do a simplified version so you can just play and enjoy. They've also allowed you to reskin the interface a little bit to give you a light mode as well as the dark mode, which, yeah, that's good, because I think that shows up on screens better in some situations. They've done other things like simplify the workflow, made it a bit more drag and drop. They've beefed up the sound engines, added new effects, new filters, and have got a whole new way for you to find your sounds. So it's good, always good, continues to be good, and increasingly is good. I think it's a sort of synth that everyone really should have. Arturia have also released the Mini Freak, got it there? The Mini Freak the Mini Freak as a piece of software. Now, originally they released this just for Mini Freak owners because, hey, I've got a wonderful hardware synth I'm going to play with. Oh, I've got the free software version. Why do I want that? Put that away on the shelf, back to my hardware. I didn't really see what the point of that was. I mean, I guess, all right, so the point is, right, that you do all your wonderful work on here and then you can save it all in the software version on your computer. I suppose, you know, if you're that kind of person. But hey, I've got a hardware synth. I don't need a software version. I mean, in some ways it goes back to the Modwave with the Korg as well. But Korg at least released the Modwave VST for everyone. They didn't just give it free to the people who owned a Modwave, because that wouldn't make any sense. But Arturia like to do things in their own way, and so they did. So every hardware owner was going, great, look, I've got this. This is an imaginary CD I have in my hand from back in those bad days that has the software version on that they're just going to throw in the corner. However, they saw the light, and now the Mini Freak software version is available for everyone, which is great because it is a fair bit cheaper than the hardware, and it is a really good synthesizer. It's good because it's different. I mean, the interface is a little bit Pigment-like, I suppose, but what's fascinating about the Mini Freak as much as anything else is the oscillator algorithms. I mean, it has a lot of stuff from Mutable Instruments in there. It has the algorithms from the braids, but it also has extra stuff, has stuff of their own, has stuff from Noise Engineering, and it's continuing to expand. And the interesting thing about it is that you're using these, what were essentially Eurorack oscillators, together in a polyphonic synthesizer environment, and that is very different, very quirky. I don't think it always works. I don't think it's always right. Sometimes it's a bit random, but it's fascinating and interesting, and the way you can shape things and create tones that perhaps you hadn't thought of before. So yeah, I really like it. I haven't really played with the software version, but as far as the hardware goes, it's a great synthesizer. So yeah, have that too. Now this was a great find. The Melody Oracle. What extraordinary thing from Amp, which I think is the guy's name, initials or something, which is spookily coincidental. What is it? It's some kind of weird sort of chaos triangle which is going to probably invite all sorts of energies into your life. It's a musical pattern divination machine. It divines and seeks out patterns that you can run through, you know, very simply through your synthesizers and through other bits and pieces, and it works through this triangular sort of touch plate system. And what you do is that you have these meeples, essentially, that you place on different places, and that creates the connection, and that creates the pattern, whether that's in changing octaves or melodies or timings and divisions and bits and pieces. And in some ways you can roll a dice and play something in order to change what it is that it's generating. Totally fascinating, totally I mean, innovative and creative and awesome. I would love to get my hands on one and have a bit of a play. It also has an optional sort of light box which further sort of enhances the environment and the situation and the space that you're in, that joins these two worlds and these dimensions together. So you're not only patterning sound, you're patterning visuals, all through the placement of things and interaction. I just think it's wonderful. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to interact and create and generate. The NGEN from Spektro Audio, fascinating box of algorithms. It's a sequencer, a MIDI sequencer that can run your whole show, presumably, but it doesn't do sequencing in your normal way. You're not programming individual steps, although I think there is a little bit of that going on if you want within one or more of the algorithms. But the idea is that you're using it a bit like you use devices in Ableton Live. In fact, that's where they started. They started off writing devices for Ableton Live and creating interesting pattern-based algorithmic pattern generations through using a couple of parameters, changing a couple of parameters, and it generates more stuff. They've taken that, originally they put that into a hardware box just by itself, and now they've kind of expanded it into this NGEN thing, which has this original pattern creating algorithm along with a whole bunch of other ones. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff in here. It will create drums. I mean, you could, I suppose, you could see it as it's pulled in the grids from Mutable Instruments, it's pulled in the Turing Machine from Music Thing Modular, and has combined these into different ways with polyphonic things, with chords, with chord progressions, bass lines, more percussion, Euclidean rhythms, all of those sorts of generative ideas packed into a box. Very, very interesting. You've only got 4 knobs on the top, so I imagine there's going to be a bit of menu diving going on. But within each of these algorithms, they just have a handful of parameters which allow you to affect change and intention and direction upon what it is that it's generating. Now, while it is essentially a MIDI box, I do note that it does have 2 lots of CV gate out, which is very cool. I mean, I would like it to have a lot more, but maybe it's the ideal thing to run with a MIDI to CV converter module, and then you could like squirt it all over your Eurorack. I mean, particularly with the percussion stuff, you know, you need a whole bank of triggers for that. But yeah, an interesting little box. It's little and it's got a whole load of stuff in it. I really like the way it's bringing all of that really cool stuff out of Ableton that it's really hard to get to because it's in tiny weeny boxes on the bottom of the screen and you've got a mouse around to get to it because there's no touch real support, particularly in Ableton. So pulling that out, sticking it in a box that lets it stick it on your desktop with all your little synths, I think that's awesome. Far more convenient than having to boot up your bloody computer every time you wanted to do something. And the other thing that I really like about it is that you can essentially turn it on, tell it to start doing stuff, and it will, and you can then play with your synthesizers without having to play something, without having to record something. You could just set it going and you can tweak and enjoy the sound design and exploration of synthesis. Rhodes has sampled its own Mark 8 into the ultimate Rhodes electric piano instrument. Now, there have been plenty of electric pianos over the years, plenty of sampled versions of it. The Mark 1s, the Mark 5s, you've got, I mean, everybody does an electric piano, really, I think, and most of them are pretty great, I have to say. I've used several. I really enjoy the whole sort of sustained, tremoloed, slightly overdriven Rhodes sound, the tinkle twinkle of Riders of the Storm, all that kind of thing. Love it. Have always loved it. I would love to have a proper Rhodes piano. Now, the Mark 8, of course, was released the other year or so and is brilliant. I mean, I had the opportunity to play one at Synthfest in October, and it's simply a lovely instrument. Well, Rhodes have decided that they're going to produce a VST version, and they have. It's here. It's massive. I mean, it's sample based, and you go along and say, you know, do you want to download the trial? Yeah, sure, okay, I'll click download on that, and then this thing comes up and it says 14 hours remaining. What? It's like 20 gigs. 20 gigs in size, and that's just for the demo. You would have thought for the demo version they could cut a whole load of it out and just give you a bit of a basic. But anyway, by the by, it's a huge sample set for a single instrument. So evidently they have hundreds and hundreds of samples for hundreds of velocity levels, you know, multiple miking positions and recordings and samples of the tines doing their thing and mechanical stuff doing theirs, the drops and the releases and the dust and the coughing of the guy down the road and dogs barking, you know, the whole lot, to give you that thorough Rhodes piano experience. They've done something slightly odd though, which is they've split it into a regular version and a pro version, which I don't think that's a particularly good idea. The pro version gives you access to some deeper tuning, so you can tune individual notes. I guess you start fiddling with a little screwdriver over the tines in the back, perhaps, and also gives you the full range of effects on the front rather than just the preamp and the basic bits. So it's like there's £100 difference, and that just seems a little strange to me. I think producing one version at a decent price that has everything in it, I think would be preferred, personally, I think. But hey, you got to do what you got to do. The other thing is that they are running a competition to win the real thing, the hardware, the Mark VIII. Amazing. So what do you got to do to win it? Well, they've put out this video which has got this bloke singing or rapping or talking or something, you know, whatever it is you kids do these days in a musical endeavour, and you are supposed to provide a soundtrack to that, presumably using the V8, which is what this virtual Mark VIII is called, which makes sense, I think. So yeah, produce a soundtrack. I think it's like 2.5 minutes long or something, and send it in, and they'll pick the one that they like the best. I have absolutely no advice to offer on that, other than that sounds great, give it a go, and there's no way of knowing what it is that they're after. But it's a great idea, and one day I'd love to have one of those pianos. Now, Strokes from Congburn is a remarkable sequencer app thing that's been around a little while, and I really enjoyed it when it first came out. I have less time for software these days, so I'm not delving into these things quite as often as I used to. But it has got to a kind of a strange version of 3.9. 3.9 apparently is the big one. You know, don't worry about giving us a 4 or a 3 or something like that as being the big upgrade. No, the big upgrade's always on 3.9, and that's what we've got. So what they've done is that this is a pattern-based generative evolving sequencer that's kind of crazy, and lots of stuff going on with multiple tracks that you can just go to town on. And it pulls, again, it sort of pulls on that Ableton Live ideas of devices, but it puts it up into a lovely big interface so you can really interact with it. And what they've done is they've just introduced a whole sample engine. So rather than purely being a MIDI sequencer and running other stuff, it can now load up its own samples. Relatively simply, drag and drop a sample in, you've got a start and end point, a little bit of envelope, a bit of a filter, that kind of thing, but it allows you to create sounds within itself, so that you can now run an entire sequence which is running its own sound engine. And it's great, it's a lot of fun, it looks awesome. It's also now available, I'm not entirely sure when it became available for iOS, but it is certainly available for iOS now on your iPad, so you can get in there with your fingers, but otherwise it's still a Mac and PC plugin, and is an awful lot of fun to play with. It's all grids, it's all matrices, it's all modulation, it's all individual movement and patterns and polyrhythms and all that kind of jazz going on within it. It looks like a lot of fun. It's the sort of thing that you could do all your sequencing from. In fact, if I thought about it, I would probably run it on my Surface here to run a whole bunch of synths. I'll do that. When I run out of things to do, that's one of the things I'll do. Right, so a bunch of Eurorack stuff then. So there's probably a lot in here. I'll try to keep it short and sweet about various bits and pieces, because otherwise the whole modular business gets a little bit out of hand, because there's so much of it. It's this enormous creativity and manufacturing going on of these people in their sheds, boutiquing and modern stuff. It's just just brilliant. I'm constantly amazed, and every time I'm looking at something I'm going, oh my goodness, well that would be interesting. Why don't I stick that? No, I really can't. I really can't. Except that I do, and I did. In fact, let me start there. Let me start there with the weird crazy chicken 6 eyes. Yeah, you weren't expecting that, were you? No, so crazy chicken, I mean this is all off the top of my head now. I think they're operating out of Kiev, which is extraordinary. So they have produced a couple of weird modules with this wonderful chicken that's all over it. And this particular one that I was really struck by, and I so struck by it, I decided to buy it. It's called the 6 Eyes, and it's a strange algorithmic sequencer. I like things that generate stuff. I like being able to generate things that I don't have to think about too hard, so I can get on with the messing about. And this is one of those things. What does it do? Oh, I don't know. I haven't quite got it yet, but I plan to do a full review of it because it seems fascinating. You have a clock. You then divide that clock with one knob. Then another one pulls out some different notes at a different time to that one. And then there's another knob that pulls out another thing on another timing. So essentially you've got this cascade of times going on. So it's essentially generating notes depending on the position of these 6 knobs, which interact with each other in terms of timing and octave and pitch and such like. Is that making any sense? Probably not. I mean, it said on the website that it uses some form of interesting algorithm, and I think that probably sums it up. But it looks like the sort of thing that will be able to generate stuff quickly, that you can quickly dial in changes and variations and differences to it and then dial it back. You know, it has that Turing machine element, but the Turing machine doesn't often let you control exactly how it's doing stuff. You know, it generates, which is great, and then it just kind of does its own thing. Whereas this is a bit more control over how often things generate, how that interacts, and how that sparks off each other. I don't think I'm making any sense at all, but it looks fascinating, and I'm planning to give it a go. Next up, Plaits, Mutual Instruments Plaits. As like a final farewell to the world of modular, Emily Gillett decided to stick in a new firmware into the variable Plaits. Now everyone has a Plaits. It's one of the most popular oscillators there has ever been. And what she did is stuck in an entire DX7. I mean, it's just brilliant, really. Totally brilliant. So an entire FM engine has been put inside. It'll even take DX7 patches, I believe. Just totally extraordinary. Just amazing. I mean, we're going to miss her deeply, I think. And we've already talked about this before many times. And it's just amazing the work that she's done and the impact that she's had on the entire industry. It's just extraordinary. Just extraordinary. And oddly, you know, I'm the sort of person who really doesn't like Plaits. I really don't. It's not for me. It's like, which oscillator do I want to use? I don't know. This one, I don't know. That one, oh, I don't know. I just spent, it's an I don't know machine. I don't know which one, what one, why would I want that? And now I've got that one, all the knobs are different, even though they're labelled the same. Or are they the same? I don't know. Within a small Eurorack setup, it obviously offers a lot of different sound combinations, but I don't want any of those sound combinations. I just want the sound of a nice analog oscillator. So, strangely, I have had a Plaits for a little while, but I've sold it on because somebody else really, really wanted it. They're thin on the ground now. Perhaps I should have looked after it, kept hold of it, and then sold it for millions. But I didn't. Erica Synths has taken on a bit of Hexinverter. Now, Hexinverter Electronique out of Montreal, I think in Canada, sadly announced that they just can't cope with the whole chip shortage and cost of living and energy prices, all that other stuff. And they were going to be closing their doors this year. Or the end of last year, I think. But thankfully, Erica Synths has picked up a bunch of their stuff. Not the whole lot, but a few. Most importantly, the Mind Phaser, which is this crazy, weird, complex oscillator, which they've struggled to really get out. I think they just about fulfilled their first Kickstarter contributors. I think they sorted that out and then kind of couldn't really do any more. So Erica Synths is going to take that on. It's going to rework it a little bit, presumably to move it towards components which are more readily available. And they're also taking on the Mutant Brain, which is the MIDI to CV converter, I think, which is great. So that's good for your what was it I was talking about earlier? The NGEN. Yeah, that's great for that. And they're also doing the Mutant drums, which is, you know, a drum synth. Great, all good stuff. They've given them fabulously dark and black looking front panels, and it's just a really exciting and positive thing to see that possibility. It's like, I mean, a while ago with Future Retro going under, and then a bunch of people coming in to buy it off them and to keep it going. I mean, I think that's an extraordinary testament to the kind of community that we have within the synthesizer world, is that people will do that. We'll take on each other's things and we'll carry torches forward and we'll take over products. I think that's awesome. And Nano modules have done a couple of things. They released this wonderful case, which I think I talked about before. Just a brilliant bit of marketing and imagery and photography and all of that. But that looks like fun with a whole 1U of utilities all ready to go. But the other thing they've done recently is they've released an interesting envelope. It's called the Serra envelope, which has some interesting things in it. I haven't had the time yet to look at it, but I do plan to, and I hope to do a video on it soon. We've had a cool new delay from Venus Instruments called the VENO-ECHO, which is a stereo delay, 2 independent signal paths, I suppose, that can feed back and cross feed into one to the other, run it mono or stereo. It has a low pass and high pass filter built in there somewhere, and also some saturation through asymmetric clipping and downsampling. You can reduce it down to some kind of Karplus strong string generator, or you can just use it for experimental delays off into the universe. And that reminds me, I've also got a delay from Axis Modular called the LK delay, which I plan to build soon. It's in this fabulous bag. I've got a lot of DIY to do, let me tell you, a lot of DIY to do. I've got some pressures at the moment, but I will get to it, I promise you. It was that whole thing. I mean, I lost 2 weeks at the beginning of this year because I wasn't feeling very well, and that's just put me so behind, you will not believe. And we're barreling straight towards Synth East, and I've got a whole load of stuff to sort out with them, and I need a haircut, and it's like, oh my goodness. And I've got a brand new synthesizer to reveal, like, on Tuesday. Lot on. Anyway, what was I talking about? ALM Busy Circuits continue to be very, very busy out there. They've released a couple of expanders for Pams, the Pams Pro, which give it clocks. I've thought about this a lot. I mean, probably thought about it far too much, I imagine, but clocks from Pams is a weird thing. Now, I've played with Pams a little bit now because I'm very, very new to the whole world of Pams, and now I understand why I've struggled a few times when jamming with other people, because their ideas of clocks are very different to my ideas of clocks. My idea of a clock is that it goes clock, clock, clock. People who have Pams think that 24 beats per second per note, or whatever it is where clock is at. And so I'm forever struggling with this. Oh my God, everything's just going so fast. It's like, can I not just have I just want a clock. Anyway, the new expanders for Pams Pro seems to sort that out by giving you, well, the little one, there's a little one that just gives you the 24 thing that it seems to like, that kind of sync, whereas the other one gives you proper clock outs with divides and multiplications. Because I found the first thing I did when I plugged in the Pams Pro was how do I get a clock out of it? It's just running everything 24 times faster than it needs to be, and you know, I'm having to go into menus to try to divide that clock down to something that actually just produces a pulse. There's probably an easier, simpler way, and I plan to do a video investigating exactly what Pams is about. But yeah, clocks, man, just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Anyway, what have they done? So ALM have produced something called Mega-Tang. They have some great names for stuff, I have to say. It's a 4-channel linear VCA and stereo mixer. Simples, easy, straightforward. We like that sort of thing. It's got a bit of a send and return, which is unusual for a VCA, but more normal for a stereo mixer, which is why it's kind of both those things. You've got voltage control over the level, essentially, and then a send for an effect and a couple of headphone outs and a mix out, that kind of thing. Awesome. Mute buttons, I think. Yeah, great, good, standard stuff. I was going to talk about the Magnetic Freak Gaussian generator, but honestly I don't know anything about that. And also the Tronics Audio Apollo, which all it makes me think of is Battlestar Galactica. But it looks like it does look like part of one of those spaceships. Absolutely, could be, I think. But no, I don't know enough about it to really talk about it anymore. But I'll finish off this section with the Befaco ChikiPower. ChikiPower. This is a cool thing. I've got one of those somewhere. Like I say, I've got a lot of DIY to do. So yeah, here it is. Very simple. Not much to it really. Is there a PCB in there somewhere? Oh yeah. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. So what is it? Well, it's a little power supply. Power supplies are tricky in Eurorack. Always are. Always have been. And so having something which makes that simpler is always good. Always good. And this is just a little square block. Gives you, I think, 3 or 4 power ports out of it. Powered over USB. You just plug it in. And it means that you can work with modules outside of a case a little bit. It's like if you're testing DIY stuff, it's perfect. Because, you know, having to pull a case apart and putting stuff in and drop it, you know, it all gets it to be a bit of a faff. Whereas this is a thing that can sit on your desktop. You can just plug stuff straight in and you can check that it works without having to worry about bigger power supplies and dangerous things and all that kind of stuff. Simple, good. It will also run a small system. Stick it inside a lunchbox or a case, something like that. Fantastic. Great. Build it yourself. Good, cheap, from Befaco. Awesome. And finally, of course, Synth East. What's happening with Synth East, I hear you say? Well, it is coming on. Great guns, let me tell you. And very little of that has anything to do with me. I'm sure. Trying to find the time to work on it. It's coming along nicely. I've got a whole bunch of manufacturers coming, which is great, to the point now I'm slightly overflowing. I'm having to go down to the venue this week to measure it up to make sure I've got all the right space to fit in all the tables that we need to get everything in there. It's also very nearly sold out, which is dead exciting. The daytime thing actually sold far more tickets so far than the evening, but I'm reliably informed that evening concerts tend to sort of go right to the wire because people aren't sure whether they can get out or not. You know, it's during an evening, you know, and so ticket sales tend to ramp up towards the end. So, but the evening's going to be brilliant. I mean, Nick Colt-Voigt, if you've never checked her out, do go and find her stuff on YouTube. It's fantastic. Finley Shakespeare is a tour de force of modular performance. He's fantastic to watch. And also, it's going to be me and Steve Davis having a bit of a jam at the start of it. So that's the evening performance. That's just going to be fantastic. You should come to that. Absolutely come to that. It's going to be a great time. And I think I'm probably going to be very drunk by the end of it, which will be great. So that'll be fun to see. The daytime is when we've got all these manufacturers coming along exhibiting stuff, but also not just manufacturers. We've also got a few enthusiasts bringing classic old synthesizers to play with. We might have a DX1 there, going to have Korg M1s, Roland D50s, things like that. Old synths you'll get a chance to play with, possibly even a Fairlight, which is a little bit exciting, but I'm not too sure about that. We're just going to have to see how that goes. We're going to have performances through the day. These are going to be slightly different. These are going to be just small, sharp performances that are just there to break up the day so that we can celebrate the music making that we're doing while we're talking about the gear that helps us do it. So we're going to have a couple of performances, and then it's going to fall into this weird all-star patch-off where myself, Steve, Gaz Williams, Sam Battle, Lula York, Andrew Brooks, quite possibly, I think maybe more, I don't know, at least that many people are coming together to jam, to improvise, unrehearsed, unknowing about what on earth it is we're doing, as a kind of a modular experiment where we are randomizing the musicians as well as randomizing our patches. It'll be a once in a lifetime, never going to be repeated, you'll never hear anything like it type event. I mean, Sam's going to be there, Sam Battle, and he's going to bring also one of his marvelous synthesizers of some kind for people to look at, so that's dead exciting. It's just going to be the most awesome day. It's going to be crowded as well. It's going to be full of lovely, wonderful people, and it runs from 11 o'clock till 5 o'clock during the day. Now we've sort of split it into two things because everything's happening in the same space, so we need to clear out the hall in order to do the evening performance, which is why it's split into two things. But it's only a £5 or £6 or something for the day, and it's like 12 quid for the evening, or just buy a 15 quid ticket and it covers the whole lot. And you just have to clear off for a couple of hours while we change the room out. It's going to be great. Come, say hello. We'll all be there chatting and smiling and nodding and pretending not to be socially awkward. And this is all happening on March the 4th in Norwich at the Norwich Arts Centre. And it's going to be a really good time. I'll be doing a whole load of promotion on it over, because it's like 6 weeks away, 5 weeks away. So I'll be doing a load of promotion for it over that time, just to big up all of the brands who are going to be there and to prepare ourselves for what's going to be a fantastic time. So that's going to be awesome. But first, there's a lot of talk on that old internet about how YouTubers get paid and whether they're worth anything and what their value should be to our industry. Here's where I am with that. I mostly make review videos, and so the concept of being paid for that is slightly odd, weird, and ultimately ethically dubious. If you're trying to make an unbiased review, then the last thing you need is for the manufacturer to be giving you money. Now, of course, people say, well, you've given the gear for free, and sometimes that does happen, and that can be awesome. But it's not quite the same as being paid to do something. Well, you can argue the toss about that, by all means, but in my experience, it's just not the same. And ultimately, we all get our biases from somewhere, and so an unbiased review is actually a little bit of an oxymoron. But hey, let's not get off track. Now, I have tried making content for manufacturers that was paid for, and it was an absolute disaster. It just does not work for me. And I think it's really important to say that not all YouTubers are the same. We have different motivations, we have different intentions, we have different ways of working, we have different aims and dreams and desires and hearts for what it is that we're trying to do. Some of us are never going to make a living from it, and yet I don't feel that that makes the content that we create any less valuable than content from those who do. Personally, I do it for the thrills and the feels, and honestly, it's one of the only ways I'm actually able to stay creative and make some bloomin' music. The reality of YouTube as a career is not a great one. I mean, I make about $300 a month from YouTube. I have 45,000 subscribers. You know, that'll give you some indication of how likely it is that you can actually make a living at it without really flogging yourself into the full business of being a YouTuber, an influencer, someone who's into production, who's doing your sound packs, who's doing your courses. You have to expand. You have to create an environment around your channel which enables you to earn and monetize what you do. I am rubbish. I'm rubbish at all of that. You know. So what I do, luckily, I have the opportunity to write for magazines and websites, and it's that really that ultimately funds everything else that I do, and that allows me to put some space and time aside for making videos. I would like that balance to be different. I would like the videos to pay more, perhaps, so that I can spend more time doing them, because it's something that I really, really enjoy. But it doesn't look like, for me, that I'm going full-time anytime soon. And so ultimately I don't expect a manufacturer to pay me to do anything. I make videos on things that I like, that I enjoy. Sometimes I feel obligated to do so. Sometimes I just want to do stuff. And I absolutely appreciate that there is this strange dynamic between manufacturer and YouTuber. I think we all feel it. And I don't know what the answer is to that. And I'm very, very happy to have a conversation about it, because it's interesting. And I enjoy, if nothing else, transparency. So if you want to talk about this some more, then come along to my live stream. It's probably this Sunday, probably 8 o'clock, probably, and we can get together. The first time we've got together this year. It will be great to come together and we can talk about all these things. I am very, very happy to talk about absolutely every aspect of my YouTube journey, the channel, the money, the gear, whatever it is. More than happy to talk about it. So do come along and we'll talk stuff. But otherwise, if you'd like to support me and to support this channel, here's the things you can do. First of all, you can subscribe. Now, I know that word often makes you think, oh my goodness, I've got to give the guy some money. No, YouTube subscription doesn't cost you anything. You just click on the button and YouTube goes, oh look, somebody likes this guy's channel. That might be awesome. We should bump it up the list a bit. And so the growth in subscribers is a useful indication to the YouTube algorithms that this channel is of interest. So do subscribe. It makes me feel good, and so that's a nice thing. Or if you're feeling a little bit braver, you could click on the Super Thanks button. It's in there somewhere. I think it looks like a heart with a $sign in it. Click on that and you can send me a tip, you know, the price of a coffee or a pint or something. So if you've really enjoyed a particular video, you can click on that, you can send me a couple of quid, and that would be awesome. Fantastic. That's just amazing. If you're feeling really brave, you could join me on Patreon. Patreon is a website that allows you to do a regular financial support to a creative person. So I have a Patreon, you can go there, you can sign up, a couple of quid a month, again, buy me a pint once a month maybe. Is fantastic, and that sort of support is awesome. There's a small band of people over there who are just completely brilliant, and you get direct access to me, you get access to other bits and pieces that people don't normally get access to, and it's a fabulously wonderful community of things. The other thing you can do is buy merch, like a rather fitting hat for the winter or for the summer, who knows, but it's gorgeous. But I have a whole bunch of t-shirts, posters, bits and pieces that, you know, are somehow tied to me in some kind of modular or molten way, and that's another way that you can support me. So there are lots of different ways that you can support this channel that don't require me to take money from manufacturers, and that's ultimately where I want to be. I want to be able to do videos which are free to the viewer and videos which freely support manufacturers' products that I'm interested in, that I think people will find interesting, and to spread that around in different ways. Now this is just me, and YouTubers are very different, and other people have different thoughts and feelings on this, and mine also evolve and change over time. I definitely thought I would have been into working with brands on a proper paid basis, but it just turns out that no, I can't do it. It's a disaster. No. Trying to meet the expectations of a client in the kind of videos that I do is not, no. But anyway, I fully support, you know, all YouTubers in whatever it is that they want to do, whatever they think they need, and whatever their worth and value seems to mean to them. It's awesome. So I think that'll do. Super Booth has just started selling tickets, which is in May, so that's going to be worth your attention, I think. And I've decided that I'm going to get myself sponsored to go, but sponsored by an electronic motorcycle firm. Now, does anybody out there know anyone who works at or has anything to do with electric motorcycles? Something like, you know, the Harley Davidson Livewire, perhaps, or something from RGNT, or Soku, or Super Soco, or whatever they're called, or Zero, or any of those brands out there who would be interested in lending myself and a mate a couple of electric motorcycles so that we can electric motorcycle ourselves all the way over to Fez, Berlin for the electronic music festival that is Super Booth 2023. It would be great. You know, we could shoot a load of video, do a load of live streams. It's an adventure, a week of getting there and a week of getting back. I think that could be amazing. It's a real opportunity for someone out there, for some bright spark out there at an electric motorcycle firm to really get themselves on the extraordinary map of my YouTube presence and somebody else's. Oh, it'll be brilliant. Do it. Just get in touch. Do it. It would be brilliant. How do you get an electric bike from Norfolk to Berlin in a few days for a synthesizer show? That's the task. That'd be great. So yeah, there we go. That'll do. I've got lots of stuff coming up, all sorts of videos coming out of my ears. Perhaps more importantly is going to be the release of a particular synthesizer on the 31st of January, which I am working on a video now, and we'll have that ready. So that's exciting. Where's it from? Well, it's from Pittsburgh. Don't tell anyone, though. I think they've already let the cat out of the bag, so it's okay for me to say. So that's exciting. That's coming up along with a load of DIY. I've got to get my Descartes Dream built for Synth East, obviously, so I've got to get that underway. But otherwise, I just need to shut up and move on with my day and get down to editing this thing into some kind of form. So this Sunday, hopefully, I'll confirm it with a YouTube link at some point. Hopefully this Sunday night we'll do a live stream. We can talk about you know, the deal of being a synth YouTuber. We can talk about the gear. We can talk about all sorts of exciting things. It'd be great just to get together, have a bit of a chinwag. So there we go then. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.